One of the reasons I wanted to start this YouTube channel that's in a sea of music guitar channels on YouTube. Of course, I want to have a lot of guitar related content, guitar lessons, product reviews, tidbits, this, that, whatever, stories. But I also wanted to help people learn from my mistakes. When I started out in music, I had a really good guitar teacher, but I didn't really have anyone to teach me the ways of the music world. About gigs, about musicians, about warning signs, about things to watch out for. And today I wanted to talk about something really important: drummers. Yes, we've all heard the famous drummer jokes, but in my experience in the music business is that if you don't have a good drummer, you don't have a good band. It doesn't matter how great the guitar player is, it doesn't matter how great the singer is. If you don't have a good drummer, you do not have a good band. The drummer is the backbone, the literal backbone of the band. They're keeping the beat. So what I wanted to do today is I wanted to talk to a good friend of mine who is a professional drummer. He was a signed touring drummer back in the 90s with a Canadian act called Flesh Paint. And he's done a lot of other projects since. I have jammed with him, I've played with him. Personally myself, he's a very good friend of mine, Mr. Kevin Eamon. Now, Emo as in the last name, not emo as in the music. I've learned in life that really good drummers are very hard to find. So if you know a good drummer and they're a good guy, hold them close, hold them tight, but don't make them uncomfortable doing it. So this is my little chat with Kevin about the important things that I like to look for in a good drummer. The important things, if I'm auditioning for a band, or if I'm auditioning drummers, or if I'm going to do a project with someone, these are the things I like to watch out for when it comes to drummers. And I had this chat with Kevin. Check it out. Friends, as I've told you guys from the beginning, I do not want to have just a guitar lessons channel. I want to bring something very different to my guitar channel. Of course, there's going to be lessons, all that other good stuff. But one of the big things that I want to bring to the table with my YouTube channel is helping people not make my mistakes and my journey in playing live and playing in bands. I had to learn so much on the fly. Today, I want to talk about something a little different. I want to introduce my good friend, Mr. Kevin Eamon. Kevin was a signed touring drummer back in the 90s for a band called Flesh Paint. And I've jammed with Kevin. I'm very particular about drummers. I've jammed with Kevin. Tight drummer. I've always really enjoyed his playing. But I wanted to talk a little bit today about helping educate you guys who are starting to get into bands and starting to playing, how important it is to have a really good drummer. Because if you don't have a good drummer, you don't have a good band. So, first and foremost, Kev, thank you for being on my YouTube channel. We're here at Kevin's music school. It's a cool school that he has with lessons going on, cool rehearsal hall.
Thank you.
And here are the details down here for anyone who wants to check it out. Website as well. First and foremost, guys, I want to talk to Kevin about this. My big thing when I play with a drummer is something called meter. Now, if you guys don't know what meter is, it's when you're playing. So let's say if the song, the recorded version is about 100 BPMs or 100 beats per minute. That's the unit we use for tempo of songs, beats per minute. If you want to play it at that speed, you want a drummer that can keep it pretty close to that and keep it consistent throughout the whole song. If you have a drummer who does not have good meter and he's going up from like 89 BPMs up to 111 BPMs and down to, it's not good. Especially, it's bad enough that the band notices, but when the audience notices or people on the dance floor notice, it's not good. What are your thoughts on meter, Kev?
Well, my thoughts on that is, unfortunately, as a professional drummer, I think when you're hitting in the studio, if you can't really play to a click, then I don't think you're really going to do too well, unless you're, a band jamming off the floor,
Yeah.
But realistically, and that's what I do with my students too. I mean, everyone's got to practice to a metronome. It's like number one, 80% at least.
Yeah.
And especially
that metronome word, sorry, Kev, but that metronome word, who said that before? Okay, anyway, carrying on here. Yeah, the metronome thing.
The metronome thing, you know, that metronome thing is pretty important. There's a lot of other teachers, they don't seem to implement it enough, I don't think, but I mean, you do, and that's good.
Yeah.
And that's why sometimes I take other students and just give them some timing lessons, right? For any instruments, it's really good. Following a drummer, though, I mean, you can get away with that as another artist as long as the drummer has a good meter, for sure, and it's very important. I mean, that's what I stress all the time, is just practice all the
Absolutely.
time.
And we've jammed. You know, you've got a really good meter. On that note, I want to ask you something. Kevin and I are around the same age, or from the same generation here. When I got started on the guitar, I told this story when I tried to be the world's fastest guitar player. I think I discussed this. If you haven't checked that video,
He's pretty fast, man.
For an old guy, but I need a defibrillator and an oxygen mask after I play a fast lick. But anyway, if you haven't seen that video, you can check the link right here. I'll post it. But back when I was coming up, so I would save all my money every month, and I get an edition of Guitar World magazine, or Guitar for the Practicing Musician, or Guitar Player. And they'd have these VHS tapes that you could get from all these top stars. You know, I don't need to mention their names, but all the top guitar players from back in the day, and they were like $80, $90, and that's an 80s money.
That's a long time ago.
I couldn't afford that, man. But so for the first several years, I tried to teach myself. I sucked royally. I often joke that nobody sucked more on the guitar than I did when I started. I had a lot of friends saying, man, just give it up, stick to football or hockey or something, stay to something you're good at. But anyway, this is what I wanted to ask you about the metronome. They never mentioned about the metronome a lot. Like, I was lucky that my first teacher, who was an excellent guitar player and he was an excellent teacher, he had very high standards for his students. He taught me about a metronome right away, and then he got me using it. I've told my metronome story many times. But then what happened was, when I took lessons from him for a few years, and then as I kind of carried on, I started realizing, like, especially when I started teaching, people would come to me from other teachers and they'd be like, you've been taking lessons for 3 years and you don't even know what a metronome is? There's just no way around it. To really have good technique, you need to have it. But did you find that was that just guitar? Did you find that with drums back, like, people didn't really talk about it much?
No, you know, it's funny for drums. I think it's always been implemented for drumming, and most of the teachers that I know, and most people I know. I was actually shocked that other, like I said earlier, like other teachers or lessons, they don't seem to use the metronome or enough. You know, you always seen the old for the piano. You always seen that, so everyone knows what a metronome is. It's they associate with this little thingy. Yeah. You know, so no, I do know that there's a lot of drummers that really don't want to play to a metronome, and I get that, because it's not easy, right? It's just another learning curve, and it's constant. But once you're there, man. And once you get good time, you got a good time. That's why I appreciate, playing with other. I can tell when I'm jamming with someone like you, or jamming with someone that just doesn't have a good meter on their own. They just, they won't find the pocket.
No.
Have a hard time finding the pocket, and are constantly pulling me, I'm constantly pulling them back to stay in the pocket. So it's great it's important to practice to a metronome, no matter what the instrument, for sure. I mean, at least some of your practice.
Absolutely. And I'm always open and upfront with my students about that, and if they choose not to use one, I've always been honest and upfront. But anyway, on that note too, since we're talking about the metronome, I always want a drummer who practices with a metronome, but I've also played in rehearsal and live situations with drummers that put a click in their ear, and it was great. The meter was metronomically perfect, but there's no feel, give or take. There's no groove. So I don't know if I was completely comfortable with that either. I don't know. How do you feel about using a metronome live?
Yeah, I'm using a metronome live, like especially back in the Flesh Paint days, where I was playing to like dats, A dot and drum loops and whatever. It depends what you're doing. If you're laying back and doing a nice solid beat, I can give it some feel. But I mean, their loops have kind of already given it their feel, and their feel is like bam, 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 right on, right? So, but if you're just playing and there's no other loops and stuff, and you're playing to a metronome, you've got to be a really good drummer to be able to, you're going to push and pull.
Yeah.
So you need to push and pull a little bit.
Yeah.
And have human feel with the metronome, and that's easy for me. I mean, I've done it all my life, and so I don't notice that. I just know where the one is. So you can play, you know, the metronome's there, and you got to be on. But if you play strict down, like you do a lot of the time in studio, sometimes it takes the feel right out. So you got to kind of know where you are on that. You got to feel it. Feel it.
Another thing I always look out for too. So we've talked about the meter. The second thing I look for is when a drummer does his rolls. Okay. If he's out of time, if he's not, doesn't do his rolls in time. So let's say he starts his roll. So if we take a basic bar, like four beats in a bar, and say he starts his roll on the 3 and he's supposed to come out, but he has to be right back on the 1 of the next bar, and he's not, I go,
You didn't say the magic word.
The other thing I want to talk about from a practicality point of view is having a nice drum kit is good, but how much do you really need? Like, you know, I've been to gigs and I've met different drummers, but when I see a drummer with an extraordinarily large drum kit, I always think of things practically, okay? Like, he's probably not Neil Peart with his playing, and he's probably not Neil Peart with the fact that he has 40 roadies taking down his kit and putting it away for him. So if you're in a band, you're going to have to help that guy tear his kit down, unless you're, like, not a nice person. I could use another word, but what do you think of these guys that have these extraordinarily huge kits? I know for me, to think about playing gigs with them, that scares me.
It scares me too. You know, and the thing about too, if you're a prog, right? Like, if you're playing that stuff, I mean, unfortunately, they all record with these huge kits. I mean, you got like 6 toms, you've got like, and then tons of cymbals, and it's unrealistic to think you're going to carry that around to a bar gig. You're not even going to fit that up on a little stage, right? So you're going to have to minimize. And you know what the good thing about that is when you're playing stuff like that, and I've done it, I've played some really, really crazy songs with 1 tom and a floor tom. Yeah. That's when you're creative. You're playing rolls on the rims, and you're going around. It doesn't have to sound exact, but you got to be mimicking all the parts that they played, and you can be hitting off cymbal stands. And you know what? You got to become creative, because you're not carrying that around, man, for a bar gig. There's no way.
No, and having been in bands with drummers with huge kits, it can get very scary and daunting, because you're like, okay, well, if we're done at 2, last call is at 10 to 2, we're done at 2. I can have my stuff packed up.
They're only going to do that a few times before they realize it's 5 o'clock and they're the only ones pulling out of the bar. Right?
It's 5 o'clock somewhere.
They've locked her up, you know, and you're like, get out.
Yeah.
Get out. You're only going to do that once or twice, because it's not fun tearing down.
No. Those are 2 of the main things I look for when I look for a drummer. Is there anything else you can suggest to the viewers of the things that they might want to watch out for when they're, auditioning drummers or looking at drummers before they join a band? Or, just to save them any hardships.
Like, so for auditioning for drummers, or what, ask for a couple, maybe some videos. Everyone's got some videos and stuff out there now, right? So try and get a little bit of info before you.
The times have been changing.
Times are changing, There's all kinds of stuff out there. And if they can't just set up a phone and give you a little idea of how they play before you invite them down and do a big jam, you don't want to waste your time on that either. But that being said, it's tough to find, find good players in any instrument, right?
And then we're not even getting into the if they have addiction issues or personality issues. We're not, we're just keeping it to the bare bones. But for me, of course, and I think Kevin agrees with me, I look for meter. And do they keep in time? Are their rolls in time? So those are pretty much the main important things. We're going to have Kevin on lots down the road. I like to be associated with a good drummer. They're hard to find, as Kevin said. But we're going to have Kevin on the show lots on this channel. Hopefully we'll have some jams and some cool stuff coming up. I want to thank Kev for being on the video here today. And remember, folks, practice hard, practice smart. And we'll see you soon.
Use a metronome.
Absolutely.